They told you awakening was bliss, a gentle unfolding, a divine reunion, a peaceful walk into the light. They lied. Spiritual awakening doesn't feel like peace. It feels like annihilation. It doesn't elevate your ego. It erases it. Not softly, not politely, but violently. It rips away the narratives you didn't know you were clinging to. It burns through the versions of yourself you thought were sacred. It isn't light, it's fire. And it doesn't come as a gift. It comes as a collapse. This is the side of awakening no one warned you about, because the truth is too uncomfortable, too raw, too unpredictable. Enlightenment doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It crashes in like a storm, and it doesn't leave until everything false has drowned. You begin to feel it in the smallest ways. You start questioning conversations that once felt normal. You lose interest in habits that once defined you. You feel disconnected from friends, from work, from your own reflection. It feels like depression. It feels like failure. But it isn't. It's a rupture. The identity you spent years building begins to decay. Your ambitions dissolve. Your desires grow silent. And in that silence, something terrifying begins to emerge. Truth. Not the inspirational kind. Not the Instagrammable kind. The kind of truth that shakes your bones. The kind that strips you. The kind that shows you every lie you've told yourself and asks, are you ready to let this go? Most people aren't, because they don't want awakening. They want comfort. They want safety. They want meaning without destruction. But truth doesn't care what you want. It only cares what's real. And what's real is this. Awakening hurts. Not because you're broken, but because the world trained you to forget who you are. And remembering, that's not graceful. It's brutal. It's lonely. It's silent. And in that silence, you begin to see nothing you thought mattered actually does. Your roles, your beliefs, your self-image, all of it collapses under the weight of what's coming. This isn't darkness. This is exposure. The false light you lived under begins to fade. And now you're left with only one thing. The raw, unfiltered now. No cushion, no story, just awareness and all that it shows. And it will show everything. It begins slowly, so slowly you almost miss it. You stop relating to your own thoughts. You hear your voice, but it doesn't sound like you. You look in the mirror, and something feels off. Not your face, but your story. The identity that once felt solid begins to flicker, fracture, fade, and you panic. Because no one told you that awakening feels like dying. Not your body, not your soul, but the mask. The idea of who you thought you were, carefully built over years of social acceptance, survival, and silent trauma, starts to disintegrate. And the worst part? You can't stop it. You try to ground yourself in your old life, your job, your goals, your people, but none of it fits anymore. You're wearing a costume that itches, a script you no longer believe in. You feel like a stranger in the middle of your own life. This is the beginning of ego death, not a concept, not a metaphor, a psychological, spiritual, and emotional unraveling. And it feels violent because the ego fights back. It screams, it sabotages, it clings, it wants to stay relevant, it wants to exist. But awakening doesn't negotiate. It cuts. It burns away the illusions that once kept you safe. It exposes the lies that made you lovable. It shows you how much of yourself was built on what others needed you to be. And suddenly you realize you were never free. You were performing strength, performing success, performing spirituality. But now the performance is breaking. You cry for no reason. You isolate. You lose passion for things that once lit you up. And beneath it all, a quiet knowing grows. This isn't depression, this is transformation. But transformation is not beautiful in the middle. It's terrifying because there's no map, no manual, just void. And that void is sacred. It's the space between who you were and who you're becoming. But most people try to skip it. They distract, they numb, they force healing. But awakening doesn't rush, it waits. And it asks one question: can you let go of who you were? without knowing who you'll become. That's the initiation, and if you're here, truly here, it means something inside you already said yes, even if the rest of you is still catching up. In your unraveling, they will try to sell you salvation, courses, crystals, breathwork, mantras. They will package the chaos you're enduring and call it ascension. But what they won't tell you is this: healing isn't gentle, it's destructive. Real healing doesn't decorate the wound, it exposes it. It doesn't soothe the ego, it kills it. It doesn't give you meaning, it takes away every false one you ever clung to until your hands are empty and shaking. You thought awakening would bring light, but what you're facing now, it's fire, and the spiritual marketplace hates fire. Because fire can't be monetized, it can't be tamed. It doesn't play by the rules of comfort or community or curated self-growth. It scorches everything you thought was you until only truth remains. And truth isn't pretty. It's not about alignment, it's about breakdown. You'll scream, you'll beg for your old life back. You'll curse the moment you ever asked to wake up, and no one will understand. Not fully, because you're not just changing, you're disappearing. People will say you're distant, cold, negative, but you're not negative. You're shedding, and what you're shedding is everything false. You no longer want to be seen, you want to be real. You no longer want to heal, you want to transform, and transformation demands everything. Your comfort, your image, your timeline, your sense of control. The process doesn't ask politely. It rips through illusion with the violence of truth. And what's left behind is raw, honest, sacred. If you've made it this far, you already feel it. You're not broken. You're becoming something your past self could never recognize, but your soul always remembered. So before we go deeper, do this. Subscribe to this channel and tap the bell icon, not for more content, but because resonance is rare. And when you find something that speaks truth, stay close, because from this point forward, there's no going back, only inward. You were never meant to awaken in a crowd. Awakening doesn't happen in circles. It doesn't arrive in group meditations, in weekend retreats, in perfectly lit altars surrounded by affirmation cards. Awakening is exile, a silent, sacred exile. And the first thing it steals from you is belonging. People drift. Conversations feel fake. Laughter sounds hollow. You can't explain what you're going through because the words don't exist. Not in this language, not in this culture. You say awakening and they hear phase. You say truth and they hear breakdown. But you're not breaking down, you're breaking open. And that's a crime in a world built on performance. You no longer want to impress, you want to unmask. You want realness so sharp, it cuts through the polite dullness of daily life. And because of that, you begin to walk alone, not out of pride, out of necessity. You feel too much. You sense energy behind every word, every silence. You know when someone's lying, especially to themselves. And in this heightened perception, most spaces feel suffocating, so you retreat. And in that retreat, a strange thing happens. You begin to meet yourself, not the self you curated, not the self you branded, the raw one, the one that stares at the ceiling at 3 a.m. and wonders if anyone else feels this much. The one that can't watch the news without crying, the one that remembers something ancient, but doesn't know how or why. This isolation isn't punishment, it's preparation, because you're being emptied, not to suffer, but to make space, for clarity, for guidance, for resonance that doesn't come from people, but from source. You'll stop seeking validation, you'll stop seeking explanation, you'll stop seeking, and in that stillness, you'll discover the most radical truth of all. You were never disconnected, you were just distracted, and now that the distractions are gone, you're beginning to hear the signal. So if it feels lonely right now, good. That means the noise has faded, that means something deeper is coming through, and that something, it was never outside of you. Awakening doesn't just hurt, it fights. Because you're not just losing illusions, you're triggering their defense mechanisms. You're threatening the ego's survival. And the ego, it doesn't die quietly. It negotiates, it rationalizes, it manipulates. It tells you this path is wrong, that you're crazy, that maybe you're broken after all. It begs you to go back, to safety, to normal, to numbness. And here's the brutal part. You'll want to. You'll crave the old life, the simplicity, the distractions, the comfort of a false self that never asked you to feel this much. Because the deeper your awareness goes, the more uncomfortable the ego becomes. Not because it's evil, but because it's scared. The ego is structure. Awakening is chaos. And when chaos enters, the mind scrambles to restore order. It creates stories, doubts, panic, depression. It clings to identity, even if that identity is built on pain, because the ego would rather be somebody and suffer than be nobody and be free. But awakening demands nothing less than total surrender. It doesn't want your best version. It wants your real one. It wants the version beneath all the strategies. The one who isn't trying to fix or prove or explain. The one who's finally quiet enough to feel truth, not think it. And this is where most turn back. They return to old patterns, old crowds, old beliefs dressed in spiritual language. But those who stay in the fire, witness something sacred. The ego burns, and what remains isn't emptiness, it's clarity. Clarity so still, so ancient, it terrifies the part of you that once needed to be important, needed to be right, needed to be loved in order to feel real. But you don't need that anymore, because now you're remembering something primal. You don't need to be anything to be everything. This is the beginning of freedom, and it always starts with this question. If you let go of who you think you are, what remains? At some point, the fire stops raging. The screaming mind goes quiet. The clinging emotions dissolve. The familiar internal chaos suddenly vanishes, and in its place, nothing. Not peace, not bliss, just stillness. You sit in that stillness, not knowing if you've healed or if you've simply gone numb. But this isn't numbness, it's space. The ego is no longer yelling. The body is no longer reacting. The need to perform, explain, fix, achieve, gone. You've entered the after, and it's here, in the eerie quiet of post-collapse, that something subtle begins to appear. You. Not the version your trauma shaped, not the self your success demanded, not the identity your spiritual image curated, just you, breathing, aware, present, empty but alert, aware of the vastness within you. A space that once scared you now feels like home. This is the true integration, not the moment you feel enlightened, but the moment you stop needing to be. You no longer seek answers. You live inside questions. You stop trying to heal and start honoring what's real. You don't run from pain, but you don't identify with it either. You stop performing awakening and begin embodying it. And in that embodiment, the world begins to respond differently. You move through space slower. You speak with less noise. You choose with more depth. You become impossible to manipulate, not because you're hard, but because you're whole. People notice, some leave, some draw closer, but you're no longer molding yourself to be received. You radiate, not light, not love, not as cliche. You radiate presence, and presence changes everything. So here's the shift you may not have seen coming. Awakening doesn't make you someone new, it makes you someone true. And in this stillness, ask yourself, not intellectually, but somatically, if no one expected anything from you ever again, who would you allow yourself to be? You've lost things you thought you'd keep forever. People, places, identities, desires. Awakening doesn't just shift your mind, it strips your life. And for a while, it feels like ruin, but it's not ruin, it's clearing. Clearing space for a life that's real. And here's the truth no one tells you. Awakening doesn't give you more, it gives you less. Less attachment, less illusion, less pretending. And in the beginning, less feels like lack. You crave the old fullness, the noise, the ambition, the endless movement. But now, your nervous system won't tolerate what it used to. Your body rejects inauthenticity. Your soul refuses distraction. You've outgrown what you once chased, and you can't unknow that. So you walk with a quiet grief, not because something went wrong, but because something ended. The life you built from survival no longer fits the being you're becoming, and mourning that is sacred. This grief isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because now you know the price of truth. It costs comfort, it costs control, it costs the illusion of being liked, understood, or approved of. But what it gives you is everything you couldn't buy with those things. Stillness that doesn't collapse under pressure, clarity that doesn't need validation, love that doesn't demand a mask. This is why so few walk this path, because the silence gets loud, the aloneness gets sharp, the world gets stranger, but you get clearer. So clear that the falseness of others becomes unbearable. So honest that even your own shadow begins to respect you. So steady that time, fear, and failure lose their teeth. You're not done, but you're real now. And when the old world tries to pull you back through people, patterns, performance, ask yourself, what did it cost you to get here? And is anything worth going back? Let that question burn, because what comes next demands everything. This is where it lands, not in the heavens, not in the light, but in you, right here, breathing, grounded, clear-eyed, no longer searching, not because you've found everything, but because you've stopped pretending you were ever lost. You see now that awakening wasn't about reaching some higher state. It was about returning to the place before the stories, before the masks, before the need to be anything for anyone. The place where silence isn't absence, it's presence. Where you don't act spiritual, you live truth. Where peace isn't a feeling, it's a frequency. And here's the final blow. Awakening doesn't save you. It undoes you, because you were never meant to be saved. You were meant to be seen. By yourself, fully, finally. You were never meant to fit into the world. You were meant to remake it from the inside out, not by preaching, not by convincing, but by being so unapologetically yourself that illusion crumbles in your presence. You've become the fire, not the flame they fear, the flame they forgot. And now you walk different. You speak slower, you choose sharper, you love deeper, not because you're performing, but because you've tasted the truth. And once truth touches your tongue, you never crave lies again. There's no going back. And honestly, you don't want to. The ache in your chest, that's truth making a home. The quiet in your mind, that's clarity moving in. The rawness in your soul, that's power, unpolished, unfiltered, undeniable. So here's your final question, and I want it in the comments. If nothing had to be healed and nothing had to be fixed, what would you finally allow yourself to become? Let it haunt you, let it open you, and when the world tries to pull you back to sleep, come back here. Rewatch, remember, reignite, because this wasn't a video, it was a mirror, and what you just saw was who you've always been.